For something to be the best ever, it has to be something that nobody has ever done before. It's as close to perfection as humanly possible, and yet there is something even more rare than what we call perfect in the pitching world. This can make you wonder, how perfect is perfect?
Oh, no, no. It's all in my mind. Oh, no, no. It's all in my mind. Oh, no, no. It's all in my mind.
The best ever could be a perfect game, since you can't essentially do better than sitting down 27 straight hitters. There is a theoretical loophole in this, however, because you could throw a perfect game while allowing 27 consecutive missiles that are caught on the warning track. We can then turn to the most dominant performance. If you're punching everybody out and missing every barrel, you might deserve some extra credit. We can then turn to the biggest performances in the biggest postseason situations. And just because nothing is complete without full context, a huge moment itself can be grounds for a greatest ever showing too. This last one requires a different kind of analysis, but for the Dallas Braden perfect game on Mother's Day, or Daniel Hudson's final pitch of the World Series after 2 Tommy John surgeries, or the Armando Galarraga 28-out perfect game, those are some serious stories that deserve a ton of credit too. Now, in our quest to decide the best performances, there are limits. Batted ball data in Major League Baseball is limited when rewinding back several decades, so it's not like we can just statcast this question. We can stack them up against the decades, however, and find the most impressive games based on the years that they happened. Modern baseball has shown a huge shift in favor of the 3 true outcomes: strikeout, walk, and home run. This means it is more common now to see a strikeout than it has been pretty much ever in the history of baseball. If a player were to strike out 20 batters in a game, this is impressive no matter the era, but this would be even more impressive in 1930 than it would now, just because strikeouts weren't as common back then. This means that we can't look at an identical box score from today and from 50 years ago and evaluate it on the same scale. The only way that we can evaluate it on the same scale is if it is so clean that it doesn't matter. Perfect games, that's the pantheon of perfection. 27 outs, 27 up, 27 down. For us to pick the best perfect game of all time, which is outlandish because they all deserve credit for the same thing, but if we had to pick one, we could go with the pitcher that was the youngest and did it with the least experience, or the pitcher that was the oldest with the most experience, or the pitcher that did it in the postseason, or the pitcher that did it against the toughest opponent, or the pitcher that threw the final pitch just an hour and 25 minutes after the first. There's a lot of ways we could go with this. There have been 24 perfect games in MLB history, and the name itself could suggest that the best ever has to be one of these. It also happens about 5 times as frequently as something else, which is a 20 strikeout complete game over 9 innings. You can throw a perfect game and still have some loud outs. If you strike out 20 hitters in a game, you're on a different type of dominance. Kerry Wood was the youngest, while Randy Johnson was the oldest. None of these were happening in the postseason. Kerry Wood did it against the toughest opponent, and he also did it in the quickest game. So yes, it's more rare than a perfect game, but take a look and see that the earliest one happened in 1986. At that point, there had already been 11 perfect games in MLB history. Keep in mind what we said about the 3 true outcomes. Strikeouts are more common now than it was decades ago. Even with this, you can still allow runs in a 20 strikeout performance, which you can't do in a perfect game. It is an unequal comparison unless there were one number that could tell us just how special a pitching performance can be. Game score, invented by Bill James and developed by Tom Tango, it is a single number that can tell you how good a starting pitcher's efforts are in a single game. For these examples, we'll use the Tango model, but both are pretty similar. A game score of 50 is considered average, while 40 is considered replacement level. A game score of 100 happens once in only about every 540 starts, so a big league franchise can expect one start of that caliber every 3 to 4 years. We're here to decide the best pitching performance ever, so that's where we're going to start. We mentioned earlier how Kerry Wood's 20 strikeout game was against the toughest opponent out of all 5 of those 20 strikeout games. The game score formula allows bonus points for strikeouts, so Kerry Wood pretty much sets the bar. We then tip our cap to Mark Buehrle, who tossed perfect game number 18, and as we saw earlier, he did it against the toughest opposing WRC Plus out of all perfect games. Opposing WRC Plus doesn't play into game score, however, so he's a few points shy of Kerry Wood. We saw what Max Scherzer did in his 20 strikeout game, and we now see the impact that home runs can have. Still an exceptional performance, of course, but his game score is 16 shy of Burley. Just to see how the highest strikeout total in a perfect game can compare to Kerry Wood, now we check out Matt Cain. Perfect game number 22, 14 strikeouts, 6 Ks shy of Kerry Wood, and 4 points shy by game score. This single number suggests that perfect games and 20 strikeout performances can be regarded in a similar capacity. It is truly in the eye of the beholder, but this is a good starting point if the only context is one game itself. The theoretical max game score for a 9-inning complete game is 121. That is if you struck out 27 hitters. This doesn't include extra innings, but since we hardly see complete games in the majors anymore, it's crazy to set a model for anything more than 9 innings in a single game. If we're on the topic of the best ever, however, we have to go into territory that nobody has gone before. That would be the longest game in MLB history. 26 innings between the Brooklyn Robins and Boston Braves, and for the wildest stat of all, both teams used only one pitcher apiece. Leon Cador and Joe Oshker absolutely battled it out for 26 innings, and the only reason this game stopped was because of darkness. Both of them tossed 26 inning complete games, and if you check out the game score, these are ridiculous, 160 and 174. Now this is a masterclass in just battling it out, unlike anything that we have ever seen. It's also tough to envision anything like this happening in the modern game. There's also no official record on how many pitches those guys threw, but the stories suggest they were pushing around 300 each. It's tough to look at a regular season game with the same value as a postseason game. Best pitching performance ever might suggest it came when the stakes were highest, and only one perfect game has happened in the postseason. This belongs to Don Larsen of the New York Yankees. Perfect game number 6 came during Game 5 of the 1956 World Series. The Yankees would go on to beat the Dodgers in a 7-game series that year. Larsen was named World Series MVP, understandably so. If you go around telling people this was the best pitching performance ever, not many people are going to argue with you. The only way you could really compare this is by looking for additional context from before this single game. Now we show some love to relief pitchers, or at least a starter that came out of the bullpen this one time. Madison Bumgarner shut down the Kansas City Royals in Game 7 of the 2014 World Series, and it capped off arguably the greatest postseason performance ever by a pitcher. He collected a 5-inning save at the end of this magical October. He allowed minimal damage in this Game 7, but the circumstances were outrageously different to Don Larsen. Don Larsen pitched a perfect game after throwing 1.2 innings during the previous 9 days, while Bumgarner took the hill for his 5-inning save after throwing a complete game literally 3 days prior. Also of note, Bumgarner was pitching with a lot more stress on the arm than what was typical in 1956. Perhaps there is a case for Madison Bumgarner holding the greatest pitching performance of all time if we factor in the crazy workload he built up that October. One pitcher gets to throw the final pitch of every MLB season. On rare occasion, this happens in a complete game effort during Game 7 of the World Series. This has happened 17 times. Of those 17, 3 have struck out more than 9 hitters, 3 have allowed 3 hits or fewer, and 3 have walked 4 hitters or fewer. If you add the earned base runners, the mark belongs to Ralph Terry of the New York Yankees, walking 0, allowing 4 hits. One of these 17 performances looks a little different than the rest, however, and that is Jack Morris of the Minnesota Twins tossing 10 shutout innings to help secure a world championship. It's time to decide once and for all what the greatest pitching performance ever was. We aren't actually going to decide, but here's the examples and you can take your pick. If we pick based on game score, it's Kerry Wood. If we decide the highest stakes perfect game, it's Don Larsen. If we roll with the cleanest World Series Game 7 complete game, it's Ralph Terry. If we're going with the highest stakes, longest complete game, World Series Game 7, it's Jack Morris. If we factor in Madison Bumgarner being an absolute workhorse, his 5-inning save might fit the bill. And if we're going old-timey when pitch counts didn't exist, the 26-inning marathon between Brooklyn and Boston can have a seat at the table too. We don't have a unanimous selection because this game is great. You enjoy all of them for what they are, and until we have a perfect game with 27 consecutive strikeouts, all of these stand as the best in their own right. Thank you for watching. My name is Justin Wick. This is The Night Pitch.